When we think about why Rome fell, most of us imagine the same things: barbarians storming the city, collapsing legions, or emperors being murdered in palaces filled with lies and betrayal. But in reality, those weren't the only reasons Rome declined. In fact, according to many historians, the real problem was much deeper. And surprisingly, that problem was money. Yes, you heard that right. One of the greatest empires the world has ever seen partially collapsed because it undermined its own monetary system. And this story isn't just about Rome. It's also surprisingly relevant to the world today. Let's travel back nearly 2,000 years. At that time, Rome's most important currency was the denarius. It was made almost entirely of silver, and the entire empire trusted it. Soldiers received their salaries in denarii. Merchants conducted business with it. People stored their savings in it. The denarius wasn't just a coin. It was a symbol of, the public's as trust in Rome itself. And people believed Rome was invincible because Rome seemed invincible. They trusted its money. But over time, things began to change. Running a massive empire was incredibly expensive. The army had to be paid. New roads had to be built. The borders had to be defended. And endless wars required constant funding. The problem was that government spending was growing faster than government revenue. The emperors faced a difficult choice. They could either raise taxes or find another solution. They chose the second option. They began reducing the amount of silver inside the coins. From the outside, the coins looked the same, but in reality, they were no longer worth the same amount. For example, during the reign of Augustus, a denarius contained roughly 95% silver. As the years passed, that percentage fell. It dropped to around 50%, then it fell even further, and eventually it declined to less than 5%. Imagine that for a moment. The money in your pocket looks exactly the same, but it's no longer nearly as valuable as it used to be. When people realized what was happening, the consequences were exactly what you'd expect. Prices started rising. Goods that once cost a single coin now required handfuls of them. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Merchants began losing confidence in the currency. Some people demanded payment in gold. Others returned to direct barter. Because one simple truth had become impossible to ignore, people no longer trusted the money. And when trust disappears, the economy begins to shake. To make matters worse, the situation continued to deteriorate. The government minted more and more coins. The more money they created, the weaker public confidence became. And the weaker confidence became, the more money they printed. A vicious cycle emerged. Then came one of the darkest periods in Roman history. Today, we call it the crisis of the 3rd century. For nearly 50 years, Rome struggled against invasions, plagues, civil wars, and economic collapse. Emperors were overthrown so rapidly that some didn't even remain on the throne for a few months. But beneath all of that chaos was an economic breakdown. Taxes were collected in a currency that was constantly losing value. Farmers abandoned their land. Trade networks fell apart. The economy grew weaker and weaker. Eventually, Emperor Diocletian tried to intervene. He declared that the state would set prices. Thousands of goods, from grain to labor wages, were given official price ceilings. Those who violated the rules faced severe punishment. So, did it work? Of course not. Because the problem wasn't the prices. The problem was the money itself. As long as people had no faith in the currency, no decree could restore confidence. Black markets expanded. Official trade shrank, and the system continued to crumble. Years later, Constantine the Great introduced a more stable gold coin known as the solidus. For a time, it restored stability. But the Western Roman Empire was no longer what it had once been. Its economic foundations had already suffered deep damage. And that's how Rome declined. Not overnight, but through a slow and gradual collapse that unfolded over decades. So, why does this story matter? Because history has shown us the same pattern again and again. Think about the hyperinflation in Germany after World War I. People carried their salaries in wheelbarrows because money was losing value almost every day. Or consider Zimbabwe. Prices rose so quickly that stores struggled to keep up with changing price tags. Different countries, different eras, but the same underlying problem. When people lose trust in money, economies begin to fail. Societies start moving toward collapse. And eventually, governments can fall as well. Rome's story reminds us of something important. The true value of a currency isn't the number printed on it. It's the trust people place in it. When that trust